All right. Good morning, everybody. It's Monday morning. I hope you had a great weekend. It's President's Day. The kids are home. Of course, we do it right, so my kids are always home. We don't trust them to the sociopaths of the public system. But hopefully that means we'll get some more eyeballs this morning and have a good conversation. So, what happened over the weekend? Vice President JD Vance went and flopped his cock out on the podium at the Munich Security Council. And I've got Mario with us this morning to discuss exactly that. Y'all, it
Floppy
was
cocks. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, he got up there and said, "Excuse me while I whip this out." And I got to say,
it's Europe. You're not allowed to say that.
Yeah, our boy was absolutely on point. I mean, like, here it is. He broke the fourth wall. It was brilliant performance. And my only criticism is the same criticism I've had for Donald Trump generally through his first term. I
don't see any chats.
He keeps doing a lot of the right things and saying a lot of the right things, and then hedging just a hair. And we'll cover some of that in a minute. I've got the speech pulled up, but it's a 15-minute speech, so we're not going to make it through the whole thing. Now, thankfully, however, he went with the classic format: tell him what you're going to tell him, and then tell him what you told him. Yep. So if we cut off a third of the way through his speech, the rest of it is, okay, I mentioned X. Now let me expand on that a little bit. And frankly, we're going to be doing the expanding. I highly recommend you guys go and watch the whole speech. Yep. And Patrick, absolutely, the Greta joke was absolutely awesome. That was brilliant. So, Mario, do you want to start with this Revolver article, or do you want to start with running some of the speech itself?
I want to start with I don't see any chats on my Rumble interface here.
Really? I'm getting the chats. I see. Well, I'll say good morning. Uncle Steve had first blood, and heads up, we're going to have Uncle Steve on. If not this Friday, the following Friday. He and I will sort out the schedule and the timing on that. But Uncle Steve's got a great story to tell us related to Firearms Friday's topics. I honestly, I wish I talked to him on Friday and he was telling me about it. And that was after the show. If we had spoken on Thursday, I'd have had him on last week. But with us,
can I leave the stream and jump back in? Is that possible? Maybe load the chats.
Actually, just hit your F5 key to refresh, and it'll pop you right back in, and that should fix everything. Worst case, it logs you out. Just log back in. You'll be right back in, and I'll keep talking while you're gone.
No, I didn't do it. Let me here. I'll be right back.
Okay, so while we're waiting on Mario, I'll continue saying good morning to people. And you guys understand, live is hard mode. Mario had a little hiccup there. So like I said, I see Patrick's with us this morning. There's Megan. Good morning, dear sister. Waller joins us. Great. It's always good to have some of the boys in the chat as well. I see Be Controversial. Looks like I've got Mario back. Right. There's Dad, his Majesty, and I'll tell you what, Dad said, "Oh, shoot." I bet you that's in reference to the conversation about his brother. Yesterday, Mario, regardless of how the rest of this show goes, I want to throw out there, I talked to our mutual acquaintance for some time after you and I got off the line with him yesterday. And absolutely, man, the next time he's stateside, the two of you got to get up here to come hang out on my property or get to one of His Majesty's big bashes at the farm, because you don't know how to party until you show up and Jim Lowry's frying 100 pounds of catfish.
I've had it before. The catfish, quite good. Well,
yeah, but you haven't been to His Majesty's fucking Wonderland Ranch yet. It's a magical place.
Is it like Ted Nugent land? Is it like?
In all honesty,
I mean, kind of right. Yeah.
Okay. The old man sits on the back porch, drinks coffee, and shoots 2 deer at a time with his 300 Win Mag at 300 meters. He's just like, you know what? This is what retirement is supposed to look like.
I'd love to sit there and drink coffee on the back patio and just have some stationary targets, sit up and just be sipping and like
Yeah,
That would be great.
that's how we're living our lives now.
So, yeah, as you were saying, why don't you, I guess let's roll a little bit of that beautiful bean footage. Okay. We'll,
Okay.
take a look at JD.
Let me pop that up real quick. So I'm going to start it. I'm going to start the speech about 5 minutes in, because we can definitely skip over all the pleasantries.
Vance, build. As it turns out, you can't mandate innovation or creativity. And in that fight, that Cold War positioned defenders of democracy against much more tyrannical forces on this continent. And consider the side in that fight that censored dissidents, that closed churches, that canceled elections. Were they the good guys? Certainly not. And thank God they lost the Cold War. They lost because they neither valued nor respected.
Damn, son. And thank God they lost the Cold War. Y'all, the Cold War, let's dig down this just a touch. The Cold War, it seems so long ago. And let me tell you something. There's a marked difference.
Been 30 years, man. Yeah, it's been a long time.
There's a marked difference between a Cold War soldier and a hot war soldier. Mario and I are both hot war veterans. My dad is a Cold War and hot war veteran because he was in there for so damn long. He saw a lot of it, and understanding the difference between a hot war veteran and a Cold War veteran, guys. Cold War, like go check out the video where there's a copy of Deep Cover right there, signed by Jack Barsky himself. Albrecht Dietrich, the KGB agent that was flipped by the FBI in the late 80s. And I mean, Jack's a personal friend. I met him I met him randomly when he was selling a house in Georgia, and I produced his media package to sell this beautiful mansion in, of all places, just outside of Conyers, Georgia. But he was a classic example of a Cold War military intelligence asset who remarkably served on both sides of the war because he was a flipped agent. So there's a fantastic dialogue there that we talk about that. Sergeant Major points out there's no ribbon for the Cold War, and that's true, because Cold War is, on the public face of it, what you, the civilians out there that are watching this, generally understand is that you look at the Cold War and what you see is nations posturing with the idea of mutually assured destruction, and well, we've got nukes and they've got nukes, so nobody's ever going to do anything. But y'all, the soft power war, trades, embargoes, tariffs, trade deals, all that stuff is a very complex and fascinating world that is a completely different mindset and a completely different skill set than what Mario and I had to employ, actively targeting, hunting, and destroying individual enemies. I'm out there killing battlefield commanders. Sergeant Major's out there taking out world leaders. Right? That's the difference is staggering.
Well, it harkens back to a time when we lived in a bipolar world as opposed to a multipolar world today.
Correct.
And in that bipolar world, there may have been a place for the expenditures that, say, U.S. aid was making. You know what I mean? Because it was all part of that 4D chess in trying to defeat the Soviet Union. But problem is, government institutions like that, once they outlive their purpose, then they're going to find a reason to validate themselves to continue their funding, even if they don't have said purpose. Okay, and a lot of NATO is very much like that. Okay, it's in search of a mission when there really isn't one, so they turn internally. But that's going into more deeper into the speech. Okay, I'd say just going right into it. Vance opens really strong basically saying that the threat to the European Union is not an external threat; it is an internal threat. And within the first minute of the speech, he just straight calls them out like, "Yo, you guys straight up rigged an election. You straight up rigged a Romanian election because you didn't like the result." Okay, like that's not our shared democratic values. Be for real.
Let's be real about that. He didn't actually use the word rigged. He didn't say you rigged an election. He was very explicit, because what they did was very explicit. They didn't do some backdoor deal. They didn't
They canceled
vote harvest a bunch, do a bunch of vote harvesting and shady shit that may or may not be in the legally gray. No. What they did is they straight up said, we don't like this election result, and so fuck you. It's canceled.
It's canceled.
You
and he probably
and that's a big deal, because what they just did, even if they continue to hold elections in the future, by straight overturning one, the Supreme Court in Romania has essentially abolished the election. A Romanian citizen, a Romanian voter, can no longer pretend to have faith that the system exists in a reasonable way.
And they did it at the behest of the greater European Union. Okay, so
correct.
People understand, like it's you kind of have a federal versus state government apparatus in Europe. Okay, whereas the individual countries are their state, but they all have to answer to this supranational authority, which is the European Union, which has its own elections and its own bureaucrat for life, like deep state types. Okay, so that is that internal threat to Europe, at least from a government perspective, is the fact that the larger bureaucracy of the European Union itself has more power than the individual sovereign states of Europe. Okay,
well,
and the smaller the country you are, the even more lopsided it is. For example, for Romania, okay, effectively has to bow to the European Union, and that's what happened. And they're bragging. They were bragging that they canceled the election. Okay,
right. Well,
all of it under the pretense.
In Europe? What has happened in Europe with the formation of the European Union, and this was the objective up front, is they've attempted to turn Europe into what the United States is organizationally. So essentially, the way that it works organizationally in Europe, even though they refer to England, Spain, etc., as countries, on an org chart, it looks much more like Europe and the United States are the same sort of entity, as in a country. And then the individual sovereign states, say, Georgia, Virginia, Kentucky, are more akin to what a European country is, by population, by size, and by political position within their greater bureaucratic structure. The key difference between what the United States federal government and the European Union is the European Union pretends to be something other than a country. They kind of masquerade as being something more akin to NATO or the UN, like an international conglomerated consensus. But the end result is, in fact, that they function more like an agglomerated federal organization, and happens to be much more corrupt and much more socialist than the United States government.
Well, there's nothing to check it. Okay, the European Union originally was meant to just represent an economic zone. Okay, like tariff-free economic zone between various European states. I remember in 1999 when the euro unveiled. In fact, I was friends at the time with an Italian foreign exchange student. All right, and he talked at length about the euro and what it would mean for Europe. But that was the idea, was an shared economic zone. Okay, it was over the years that super governmental governing bureaucratic body has morphed and took shape, like this endless growing blob. Okay, to the point where it can now strangle arm smaller state members of the European Union, say Romania. Okay, And they canceled that Romanian election under the pretense that Russia, it was literally Russia, that, Russia had interfered with the election, had done like significant influence operations and ad buys. And it pointed to the, yes, EU is like the USSR, Yours Majesty. Best quote of the speech, I think, was he straight up tells them to their face, if your democracy can be destroyed by a couple $100,000 in media ads, okay, then I guess your democracy wasn't that strong in the first place. Like,
yeah,
air horn. Like,
so let's get back into the speech a bit.
Yeah. So, and they rigged. Okay, well, you want to play some more? That's fine.
Yeah.
Respected all of the extraordinary blessings of liberty. The freedom to surprise, to make mistakes, to invent, to build. As it turns out, you can't mandate innovation or creativity, just as you can't force people what to think, what to feel, or what to believe. And we believe those things are certainly connected.
So what he was talking about, okay, what he's talking about there with the with you can't mandate creativity, innovation. Let's take a clear example. Go back to the Paris Climate Accords. When the Paris Climate Accords were initially entered into by Barack Obama, the correct and conservative criticism right off the rip was, now hold up a minute. These Paris Climate Accords make specific demands and recommendations. They have no enforcement mechanism. And the entire theory behind entering into it is that, well, we're all agreeing with one another that we're going to take steps to limit climate change activity, to improve the climate change outlook. Well, you've got China and India as signatories to that, who are the producers of the vast majority of all dangerous pollution on the planet. Right? Let's be charitable for a moment for the sake of argument and just concede that the climate alarmists are correct about everything. Only in the United States, of those three, China, US, and India, have we taken any measures at all to limit carbon production, improve the fuel economy of vehicles, improve the fuel economy of energy producing systems, and all of that was done by private industry in spite of government intervention. Take Solyndra, for example, where we dumped billions of dollars into solar, and it turned out to be just a big boondoggle money laundering scheme sponsored by Barack Obama, producing and achieving nothing, while at the same time, Elon Musk, while yes, with some government subsidy, has engaged in extraordinary innovation, going so far as to I mean, the man's making frickin' roofing shingles that are solar panels. So the innovation happens in the private sector. It does not happen in the public sector. And Correct. It gets even worse the more we learn about, we've been talking about the corruption of academia for some time, but now we're learning more and more about USAID, which we've pointed out many times in the past, is just a money laundering scheme to move American taxpayer dollars out of the U.S. Now we're learning more and more that has also been used domestically to create propaganda machines against the American people and to install those propaganda agents explicitly and specifically through non-governmental organizations and so-called nonprofits into positions of theoretical reliability as professors and administrators in our academia. So the idea, Vance is somewhat wrong here in that you can force people to believe certain things with adequate psychological operations, but the thing that we have learned is that a government that does that, we have many examples of a government doing that. You've got Soviet Russia propaganda, you've got Nazi propaganda, you've got modern U.S. Democrat propaganda. There are many examples of governments doing that, forcing people to think, believe, and accept certain ideas and facts without their consent, essentially under intellectual duress. What you do not have are any examples of that being done with a positive effect.
Well, it's under the perfidious guise of keeping you safe. Okay,
Right.
It's the security over freedom, right? And like Ben Franklin said, you deserve neither. So, and yes, about innovation or regulation over innovation. Okay, a great example of that. And I'm not going to talk about the Paris speech Vance gave, but in regards to artificial intelligence, right? So the European Union already has, like, they debuted, they were proud of it. They have a comprehensive regulatory body for dealing with AI, okay, or innovation in AI. But the problem is they don't actually have a multinational major AI program on par with, say, Grok, OpenAI, or the new one from China, whatever I forgot what it's called. DeepSeek, right? So
Yep.
You have regulations in place for an industry that does not exist. That is a crystalline example of the problem with Europe and the European Union. All right.
Yeah, it's peak bureaucracy.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, somebody somewhere is going to come up with a great idea. So let's go ahead and let's get out ahead of it before they come up with a great idea and fucking ruin it before they get a chance to improve the world. Because God forbid you allow a private citizen to improve the world.
Because mommy Europa loves you and she must control you.
If the modern bureaucratic state existed around the time that the traffic light was invented, we never would have had it.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So back to that speech. He also, I just wanted to add, I don't know, we probably went over it already, or we're over that part of the speech, but he did mention, okay, that the European Union or German officials in the EU have stated that if the Alternative for Deutschland, okay, does too well in the upcoming German elections, then they could just cancel those elections as well. Okay, so pretty much nice democracy you've got there. Nice shared democratic values.
We've talked about that a bit too. The government in Germany has gone out of their way to literally disarm the something for Deutschland. It's, what is it?
Alternative for Deutschland, or Alternative for Deutschland.
Right, AfD. Yeah. Alternative for Deutschland. But they've gone out of their way explicitly to disarm these guys and to exclude them from access to political acumen by dint of, again, bureaucratic interference. They're making laws and taking policy actions to exclude people from access to the political process based on their political opinions. It really is as simple as imagine if Joe Biden was able to say, you know what, Republicans aren't allowed to field a candidate in this election.
Yep.
I've decided. Yep. Only the Democrat Party, the Green Party, and the Democrat Socialists of America. Republicans are just they're too far right. They're Nazis, and they're not allowed to have a conversation. They're not allowed to speak.
And that all ties together into basically the main theme of the first half, or at least the first third of Vance's speech, is that we won the Cold War for this. We won. We defeated undemocratic forces. We defeated the USSR. Okay, only to become like some crude like bastard child of it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Where we now have basically a somewhat like Soviet type structure that governs our lives and governs our industries. Okay, I mean Germany isn't going into economic depression because they have legislated energy out of their economy. All right, like
yeah,
through basically the Greens. The Greens.
Yeah, they built a bunch of windmills and solar panels, and they don't work, and now they're tearing them down.
There's all kinds of examples of insanity. Okay, in Germany, like they cut down an old growth forest to put up solar panels. Like, holy shit! Like,
yeah.
Anyway, back to JD, if you wish.
Indeed.
And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action.
Now, real quick, when he says they've threatened to shut down social media during major events to combat, quote, hateful content. Let's be clear. When these governments, and this includes the U.S., takes maneuvers to shut down hateful content, what they shut down never includes BLM calling for the destruction of families, Planned Parenthood calling for the murder of babies, or the Taliban calling death to America, right? All those things are perfectly kosher under these regimes. If you want to scream that all white men are evil and should die, that's cool. But God help you if you crack a joke about a brother and a rope. That's not an option. And I'm not saying that people should be making jokes about KKK and hanging black people or whatever. But what I am saying is that should be treated at least exactly the same as a BLM black supremacist, ethno-supremacist calling for white genocide, or a Planned Parenthood eugenicist calling for the termination of babies based on their socioeconomic status. Those things should be viewed as equally hateful. Banning
speech is tyrannical. Okay, selectively banning speech is anarcho tyranny. All right, it's even more of an insult. So I think the hate laws, right? These hate laws he's talking about in Europe, they are meant to effectively do the opposite. It normalizes government and immigrant population violence against the citizenry.
Correct.
In these countries. Okay, normalization of violence against the actual European.
And again, like I was saying, BLM calling for violence, the Intifada guys calling for violence, all that violent radical leftist stuff, totally kosher online on all the platforms. You can say that shit till you're blue in the face, but also listed in the category of hate speech that will get you landed in jail in Europe, as JD goes on to address later in the speech. I'm not sure how far in that is, but is included praying silently near an abortion clinic.
We'll get there. That's a powerful part. You should let JD say it himself.
I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Quran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder.
And I remember from listening to the speech earlier, he's about to talk about the thing I was just talking about, but let me talk about that for just a second. Listen to what in fact, I'm going to back it up. I want you to hear him say that again.
On the internet, a day of Christian activist for participating in Quran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder.
Okay. The Christian activist, right? And this doesn't need to be a defense of his right to burn the Quran in order to be a serious point to discuss. But let's go ahead and accept, freedom of speech. Okay. I know we're talking about something happening in Europe and not in the United States, but that's also part of the point. In the United States, we have the First Amendment. And the Supreme Court in the United States has ruled, for our purposes here, that burning the American flag is an expression of free speech that is protected. That is a First Amendment protected speech activity. I'm not talking about whether or not I agree with that, whether or not I think that's good. The fact is, under the law, burning the American flag is protected free speech. If burning the American flag is protected free speech in the United States, then so too must be burning the Quran or the Bible or the
LGBT
Rainbow
flag.
People flag, right? A BLM flag, any of that, right? Now, when just to keep everything in proper perspective, when you talk about this topic, we've seen some stories recently about guys doing donuts and leaving black tire marks on the rainbow crosswalk or whatever. Okay, destroying the symbol is protected free speech.
It's vandalism as well, though.
Destroying private property is not. And one of the arguments we hear often, we'll see protesters, pro-America protesters that have an American flag, and the BLM activists will come up and snatch the flag away and set it on fire and stomp on it and destroy it. And then, well, it's my protected free speech. No. If you want to buy or make your own flag and burn that in protest, that's one thing. But what you did here is arson, is larceny, is assault. Right? So let's pop over to Europe. They don't have, this is an important point, they do not have the First Amendment. I've talked about this many times before. America is not the last bastion of liberty. It is the first footfall of freedom on the planet Earth. We are the beachhead of liberty and prosperity, which did not exist in the world until the U.S. Constitution was signed and ratified. Right? So when you look across the sea and you see people talk about having free speech, they are attempting to emulate what they see as good and beautiful from the United States, and they're failing at it miserably. So this cat in Sweden that burned the Quran, he is not protected under the law for free speech in that case. But I guarantee you that if a Muslim was to burn a Bible in a similar context, he would be treated as if free speech were an important factor.
Yeah.
So that is partially a legal rationale to make defensible the fact that this guy was convicted of a crime for having destroyed the Quran. But the rest of what JD said there, what got him in trouble to begin with, he burned the Quran, and the Muslims murdered his friend. Right, that's like the opposite of the way felony murder charges work in America. Right, so you and your friend were doing a not illegal thing. Someone else came and murdered him, and you are responsible for that because Muslim terrorists murdered your friend, and they are the victims of that.
Right. And Unverified said, we can't even fly our flag, much less burn it. Yeah, he's pointing to there are real examples in the United Kingdom where people have shown up to like the Gaza protest, or protest where it's going to be like basically Muslims chimping out about something, right? And British citizens have been arrested for flying a Union Jack or like a St. George's Cross for their protection. You know what I mean?
Right.
Very infuriating. All right.
And oh, damn it. I had another point to make that you reminded me of by saying that. Let me yeah. So
he's about to call out the UK. Okay.
No, but I want to hit this real quick because Bear mentioned we can't even fly our flag, much less burn it. I've seen videos on the internet, across Lost in the Pond, stuff like that. Europeans react to things that are different in America, stuff like that, and I've seen them from countries all over the world where people in other countries say, it's weird that Americans fly the American flag. Y'all, there is an American flag on a 30-foot flagpole in my front yard right now. You see it from the highway. It's there on purpose. And you do see the American flag flying all over the United States of America. And other countries will say, well, we just think that's weird. Here's what I think is weird. You live in a country of which you are not sufficiently proud to fly its colors, and you're doing nothing to change that. You don't have a high enough opinion to be interested in displaying the opinion that your country is good. And you're doing nothing to change that. In fact, by all the evidence, you're going out of your way to deteriorate a country in which you already have no valuable pride. Your country is fucking garbage.
That's a much deeper issue, okay? And it goes back to the trauma of World War II, okay? So what the cultural Marxists, okay, were able to achieve culturally in Europe, okay, during the Cold War, was that nationalism is bad because Nazis, right? Therefore, having any kind of pride in your country okay, or flying your colors could be akin to nationalism, which equals Nazis. Okay, ergo, if you fly your flag, you're a Nazi. That basically the insane leap that the communists were able to make as far as like the culture in Europe when it comes to national pride. So national pride is effectively outlawed, or it's viewed with suspicion.
Yeah. And real quick, Bear says, I've flown my flag since I was old enough to rig the pole. Brother, we salute you.
Dude, Union Jack is actually objectively probably the greatest flag ever made. As a brief aside. Okay.
Yeah. Mario, I'll give you a full hour to expand on that opinion anytime you want to take it.
Oh, you just look at St. George's Cross, then look at a Scottish saltire, and then look at the Northern Irish flag. Okay, and it's like, oh, you actually managed to blend all of them perfectly into a single flag, and it looks crisp and sharp. Okay, like it's objectively the best flag ever made. Anyway, that's a rabbit hole.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper. Fun with flags.
And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief.
Okay. This is the argument that we make, right? This is the argument for free speech that conservative Americans make. You have the right to speak. You have the right to free expression. You have the right to say anything you want. And over the last several years, we've endured a litany of censorship and nonsense and all the, there's hate speech and there's this and there's all. No, you have the right to say, to express your opinion, even if it's a bad opinion. And then part of that conversation is what you do not have is the right to say it without consequence. So if I express an awful opinion and someone else wants to rebut that opinion, they have the right to express that opinion. But what the judges in this case have essentially done by saying what they said, you don't have the right, that your right to free speech does not protect you from the consequences of that speech. Now, hold on a minute. The consequences of my free speech, okay, maybe I'm not protected from the consequences of someone else criticizing my free speech, but another person disagreeing with my speech in the context of the idea that we're not protected from the consequences of speech does not extend to that person a license to commit violent crimes against us, which is the argument that the court is making there, right? Well, hey, they murdered somebody. Yeah, but just because you have freedom of speech doesn't mean that you're free from offending people.
We're spending
free
too much time on
speech is
that.
supposed to be offensive. If free speech doesn't protect offensive speech, then we do not have free speech.
We're getting hung up on that a little too much. We need to get to
Fair enough.
over UK.
And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. After British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person. But no, this last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizens suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat. And in the interest of comedy, my friends, but also in the interest of truth, I will admit that sometimes the loudest voices for censorship have come not from within Europe, but from within my own country, where the prior administration threatened and bullied social media companies to censor so-called misinformation. Misinformation like, for example, the idea that coronavirus had likely leaked from a laboratory in China. Our own government encouraged private companies to silence people who dared to utter what turned out to be an obvious truth.
Yep. That is brilliant. Okay. For one main thing I want to get across, okay, is he calls out the UK, calls out the UK's government, okay, and they're not used to being embarrassed, okay, or being pushed back against. In fact, they arrest you if you do that, because in the UK you don't. It's not even freedom of speech anymore. You don't have freedom of conscience, okay. You live on a street that's declared a public access zone, like where it's the main route to go to, say, an abortion clinic, right? And you're not allowed to do something within the privacy of your own home. You not allowed to do anything on your property, and then they encourage people to fill out a snitch card on you. That's not even speech anymore. That's just, you don't have the freedom to exist. All right, you don't have the freedom to exist with your own thoughts in your own mind. And that is excellent critique, okay, of the UK government. But the best part, what makes this brilliant, is he calls out the US as well. He recognizes that the United States is in fact fake and gay, okay, when it comes to this issue, particularly of what we did regards to the COVID. Basically, he admits that the United States is responsible for the COVID psyop, which mind fucked the West, okay,
yeah,
for a
the
solid
U.S.
year and a
government
half.
in particular.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but he criticized the United States as well as the UK. All right, so that's leadership. That's excellent.
And he's absolutely right when he refers to the Scottish rules where they're distributing the pamphlets to individual homes. Hey, just to let you know, there's an abortion clinic within a click of your house, which means you're no longer allowed to pray in your home. And oh, by the way, if you suspect that your neighbors are not 100% on board with free government-funded infanticide up to and including the moment after birth, then you need to fill out the card so we can put them in jail, because it's illegal to not murder babies now.
St. Tommy makes a good point that, yes, you're right. If JD Vance was not the vice president, if he was just a German citizen and he gave this speech, he would be arrested. That is correct.
Yes. So big nuts. Get it.
Mm-hmm.
So I come here today not just with an observation, but with an offer. And just as the Biden administration seemed desperate to silence people for speaking their minds, so the Trump administration will do precisely the opposite, and I hope that we can work together on that. In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree.
Mario, I know you're not a big fan. What he just said, he's paraphrasing the old adage. I may not agree with what you have to say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it.
Yeah.
I've talked about this many times before. I want to be a free speech absolutist, and I almost am. I want to be a Fourth Amendment absolutist, and I almost am. But the fact of the matter is that the enemy is able to weaponize those principles, right? I don't want to see our intelligence agencies empowered to tap our private phone lines without cause, without a writ of reason, a warrant, etc.
Well,
But at the same time, that's an easy exploit for the enemy to take advantage of. Same thing with this idea. I disagree with what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. I want to be on board for that. But what we have learned over the last 10, 15 years is that the opposition, the Democrat Party, the socialists, the commies, they believe exactly the opposite. They will censor the shit out of you, and then they'll come crying. Hey, well, they're censoring me. What happened to your free speech absolutism? Well, that's a good question. Where the fuck were you when the Brushfire Mind got tagged for asking if the vaccine was a vaccine at all?
Yeah, probably the perfect example of this in the United States would be in the 1960s. Okay, the leftist movements, right? Say Students for Democratic Society, for an example. They were adamantly absolutist free speech. Okay, on college campuses, right? Because they were trying to basically push their message. Right. Okay,
exactly, until the moment
they used it,
got some power.
That's right. And they used it to corrupt and take over said institutions. And then the moment they were in power, they no longer believe in free speech. Okay. That's how it works. That's like Wheel of History predictable. Okay.
Yeah. Possibly the best thing. Seriously, it may be the case that the single best thing that the United States of America ever did, bar none, is in the Civil Rights Act. There is an explicit exception that communists are not afforded the protections of the Civil Rights Act because they are not people.
Based. Based.
Yeah. The Civil Rights Act just straight up says you're not allowed to discriminate against people for skin color or sex or religion or political affiliation or country of origin, except the commies, because those fucking people aren't people.
Because they're evil. Because we don't.
They are.
Exactly.
They're pure, unadulterated, malicious. We're not talking about the banality of evil. We're not talking about the soft bigotry of low expectations. We're talking about the devil is swinging his dick around and pissing fire on everything that is sacred.
Literal hatred for humanity. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, they're eugenicists. Yep. They're a cult of death.
Now, we're at the point, of course, that the situation has gotten so bad that this December, Romania straight up canceled the results of a presidential election based on the flimsy suspicions of an intelligence agency and enormous pressure from its continental neighbors. Now, as I understand it, the argument was that Russian disinformation had infected the Romanian elections. But I'd ask my European friends to have some perspective. You can believe it's wrong for Russia to buy social media advertisements to influence your elections. We certainly do. You can condemn it on the world stage even. But if your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with.
Air horn.
Now,
thug life edit with the sunglasses.
Yeah. Let me paraphrase that in summary. He said, "Listen, if commies can steal your election, you're bitches." Now, in fairness, we were bitched out in 2020.
Oh yeah.
Now, the good news is that I happen to think your democracies are substantially less brittle than many people apparently fear. And I really do believe
he's a little more conciliatory. He's a little more conciliatory and optimistic than I am on this point.
Yeah.
That allowing our citizens to speak their mind will make them stronger still.
So he just said, "I believe your democracies are not so brittle as that." I got to say, the fact is that you already pointed it out. You already brought the receipts here, JD. Romania said we don't like the results of this election, and therefore we're overturning it. The Ukraine, which is outside of the European Union, but is part of this conversation, because of the conflict there, Zelensky has suspended elections and is refusing to hold new elections. Right. So he said, I believe that your democracy is less brittle than that. I'm sorry, JD. The evidence tells us differently. If the Romanian Supreme Court, under pressure from the European Union, will just cancel an election, will just completely reverse it and annul it because they don't agree with what the people voted for, that's still the European Union. What evidence, what faith can we possibly find that any other election in the European Union at all has any legitimacy ever again? I don't know that it can reasonably be said that if any current government in the European Union persists going forward, that it can ever be expected that they have ever had a legitimate election. I'm finding it difficult to believe that without an armed uprising to overthrow the existing government in any given European nation, that a reasonable, intelligent person can say that they have reinstalled legitimate elections. Take for a moment, you hear the lefties scream about, oh, you're all Hitler, you're all Nazis, it's just like this, it's just like that, over and over again. But they're super into China and the way they do things in China. Let me clear something up for you guys. The Nazis are gone. The evil, bad Nazis are gone. As far as being an actual political power, a world power, a significant political existential entity, the party was obliterated at the end of World War II. Quite in contrast, however, the same Chinese Communist Party is still in place in China. China, for perspective, operates in a way that it is as if the Nazi Party remained in power in perpetuity despite losing that war. The Chinese Communist Party is still the political party in China. Not only have they not changed the party, they haven't even changed the name to keep up the pretense of it.
Right.
So to say that these democracies aren't brittle, I would say that they are not democracies.
When you have to cancel democracy to say democracy, that's your tell.
It's not as far away from home as I would like it to be. Right? Jamie Raskin rather infamously gave his speech at the book signing right before the election, and he said very clearly, if Donald Trump wins the election, we will refuse to certify it, and we will not allow him to be president. Now, that didn't happen, but the mere fact that a communist like that had the unmitigated temerity to say, you know what, we're Democrats, right? It's that simple. We're the Democrat Party.
We're the good guys.
We do not accept democracy. We do not accept a democratic voting process because we are the Democrat Party, right?
Well, did they not come out and just say it in 2021, just revealing that they had screwed with the 2020 election, that they had basically put their hand on the scales, right?
Oh yeah,
they were proud of it. They were proud of it. Okay.
Yeah, as soon as the election was decided, we got that article out of Time magazine.
That Time magazine, infamous article. One of the most infamous articles
behind the shadowy cabal.
Yeah,
that fortified the American election.
Cabal, which has negative connotations.
Right, they literally use the words the shadowy cabal.
All right, JD.
Which, of course, brings us back to Munich, where the organizers of this very conference have banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations. Now, again, we don't have to agree with everything or anything that people say, But when political leaders represent an important constituency, it is incumbent upon us to at least participate in dialogue with them. Now, to many of us on the other side of the Atlantic, it looks more and more like old entrenched interests hiding behind ugly Soviet-era words like misinformation and disinformation, who simply don't like the idea that somebody with an alternative viewpoint might express a different opinion or, God forbid, vote a different way, or even worse, win an election. Now,
so he mentions disinformation and misinformation right there. Let me just to help you understand, what are some of the things, Mario, help me out if I miss any, but what are some of the things that have been what are some of the types of misinformation and disinformation that they have tried to protect us from? Well, there was the lab leak theory. That was disinformation. Hunter's laptop was disinformation.
Can I get something even closer to the heart of the issue? Okay.
Yes.
Using disinformatia, misinformatia. Okay. Those are literally Soviet KGB terms. Okay. Those are those are communist concepts. All right. To subvert a society. And the fact that those are now the words of the European Union is quite telling.
And the Democrat Party in America. And let's be clear, misinformation and disinformation are things, and they are distinctly different things, right? But these are things that are used by psychological warfare operators. Misinformation is information that is not correct, but is often just close enough to the truth to slip in an extra piece of information that corrupts and colors the understanding of the fact through mechanisms like the alteration of word choice definitions and things like Russell conjugation to manipulate the emotional reaction, right? You have a very different emotional reaction to words like, you could describe a person as being stubborn, forthright, stalwart, pig-headed, right? And those four things essentially in that context mean the same thing, but they have dramatically different emotional context, some positive, some negative, right? Some of them are, you say stubborn and it's okay, he's a pain in the ass to work with. You say pig-headed, it's like, okay, he's difficult because he's stupid, right? You say stalwart, and you believe, okay, this guy's going to stick to his guns because he's right, he knows he's right, and we should trust him to remain right, right? So those uses of words within the context of this are very much psychological warfare operations, just like labeling Tulsi Gabbard as a Russian asset. Oh, buddy, I am so ready to watch Tulsi break out the hula skirt and just start dancing to the fire to the frickin' volcano gods right in the middle of the intelligence community, because you don't talk about an axe to bear.
Well, yeah. To sum it up, the misinformation would be like telling a student driver that the yellow light means hurry up and get through before it turns red. Okay. Disinformation would be telling the student driver that if you stop on red and you don't see anyone, you can just go. Like, that's the difference. One is actively trying to harm you.
Correct.
This is a security conference, and I'm sure you all came here prepared to talk about how exactly you intend to increase defense spending over the next few years in line with some new target. And that's great, because as President Trump has made abundantly clear, he believes that our European friends must play a bigger role in the future of this continent. We don't think, you hear this term, burden sharing, but we think it's an important part of being in a shared alliance together that the Europeans step up while America focuses on areas of the world that are in great danger. But let me also ask you, how will you even begin to think through the kinds of budgeting questions if we don't know what it is that we're defending in the first place? I've heard a lot already in my conversations, and I've had many, many great conversations with many people gathered here in this room. I've heard a lot about what you need to defend yourselves from, and of course that's important. But what has seemed a little bit less clear to me, and certainly I think to many of the citizens of Europe is what exactly it is that you're defending yourselves for. What is the positive vision that animates this shared security compact that we all believe is so important? And I believe deeply that there is no security if you are afraid of the voices, the opinions, and the conscience that guide your very own people.
So,
Killer.
yeah, an absolute nail. And God, there's a lot to unpack there. So let me start with, let me put last things first this time. He talks about what are you defending it for? So we've talked about the difference between a conservative American and a conservative Britain, right? In Britain, to be a conservative is to be conservative of tradition. In America, right? That's the linking word that makes the words mean similar things in different places. A conservative is conservative of tradition. Well, that means that the British, to be a conservative in Great Britain, is to be conservative of the monarchy and the parliamentary system. Whereas to be a conservative in America means to be conservative of the Constitution of the United States, which is the most, and I use this word in its correct original meaning, is the most liberal government document ever crafted.
Right.
It took the Magna Carta and said, nah, these are all generally good ideas, but we want to also say, fuck government. Right. Magna Carta, it's a nice start, but also government is, but let's just be very clear that government in all its forms, everywhere and forever, is at best a necessary evil, which in an adversarial capacity achieves the ends to which we as a free people agree, but we just don't have time to worry about because we got shit to do and we're busy, right? So when he says, what are you defending it for, right? In America, we're defending our sovereign territory, our national identity, and our constitutional right to adhere to a life of liberty and prosperity, to engage in commerce voluntarily between consenting agents, create wealth, and do it freely, and then make babies and raise them. And if you're doing it right, in my opinion, on a great big chunk of land in the middle of nowhere where you can teach your 9-year-old boy how to shoot a big ass assault rifle, because I think fucking America.
Make babies is
currently in Great Britain, at best, the thing that they are defending themselves for is to further expand an ever deteriorating socialist state that is being drained in perpetuity by a hostile foreign invading force of non-natives who detest them and are, people are flooding over borders for two reasons: to steal your money and destroy your way of life.
Yeah, they want to kill you.
Yeah, the immigrants coming across the border into the United States and into the various countries in Europe, part of their motivation is they hate you because envy is an evil thing and makes pain and hatred in the hearts of men. And so hurt people hurt people.
Yeah. It's like vultures circling a sick animal, just waiting for it to die because they want to pick the bones clean. And what Vance is, basically what Vance is saying is, do you want to live? Like, what are we fighting for? Do you want to live? He's going to get in. He's going to get here real quick into like foreign-born population in Europe has doubled in the last 10 years. Okay.
Bear says the mood has shifted here, and he means in Europe, specifically in UK, in Great Britain. It won't last, and I hope he's right.
Mm-hmm. No, so do I. That's why we're doing this speech today, because it's like a clarion call for Europe from the United States.
The other thing, and I want to tag real quick from what he was just talking about. He was talking about the shared burden and everything. Over the last 3 years or so, 4 years, we've given nearly $200 billion to Ukraine. And currently, 60% of that money is completely unaccounted for. It just disappeared into crooked pockets. But more importantly, I want you to understand this. Vance just made the point to say, hey, we're over here doing your work for you, right? Well, here's the thing. We're over there supporting Ukraine. Okay, they're not a NATO ally. They're not a NATO member, right? But they're surrounded by NATO members. They're surrounded by, theoretically, allies, right? Which is Europe, who are NATO members and members of the UN, who are funded in vast majority by the United States. We fund those organizations, which are supposed to have their own security forces for situations exactly like this, where those tiny little countries, which they're not, honestly, they're not even more like our states than our country. They're more like counties in a state. They're tiny little things. They have, in theory, an organization in the UN and in NATO that is supposed to handle security threats and military activities like what's happening in Ukraine. We are funding those entities. And that's part of the mechanism by which we, the American taxpayer, are currently subsidizing the socialist state of every country in the world. Right, every country that's not the United States, as far as the American taxpayer is concerned. This is a joke I made with my dad yesterday. Every country in the world outside of the United States, through USAID and other programs, is essentially akin to that streaming service that you forgot you got the free trial for, and now you're signed up for a $10 a month subscription, and you've racked up 100 of them. And they just keep taking money every month, and at the end of the month, you're sitting there like, "Oh shit!" That is literally the U.S. Treasury. $30 late fee on my utility bill because I forgot that I had this Netflix subscription coming out. Right? We're funding NATO and the UK and the UN, and then we're still being asked somehow to also fund the Ukraine situation, where the UN and NATO are not stepping in and doing what they should be doing with the money that we already fucking gave them.
Let me interject here, okay? There is actually corruption involved in that, okay? The reason we are funding it is because we want to be first in line at the world's greatest money-changing and money laundering operation, yes, which is Ukraine, okay? So there is a corrupt reason for it, okay?
And by we you mean
the U.S. government and the military-industrial complex, which it serves.
Right. Correct. Brief aside, one of the things I've been seeing with relation to all the Doge stuff has been, this is going to catch Republicans in corruption too. And I covered this the other day, but awesome.
Good.
That's awesome. I cannot think of more than a handful of currently elected federal level political officials for whom I would shed a tear if lightning struck the Capitol building and eliminated them.
Facts.
I'm not saying I want to go out on a killing spree. I'm saying not one of them is good enough for me to mourn their passing. So if Doge devours the entire government, eliminating corruption, y'all, I'm good. I don't have to roll out of bed in the morning. It's okay.
Europe faces many challenges, but the crisis this continent faces right now, the crisis I believe we all face together, is one of our own making. If you're running...
Okay, look, real quick, let me touch this real quick before we get further down this. Sergeant Major makes a good point, and this is one of the probably the only reasonable strategic justification for American involvement in Ukraine is that this war in Ukraine is depleting Russia's fighting force and
intentionally weaken a rival. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the not just the best, but the only approaching valid justification for the entire situation in Ukraine. And let's not forget our involvement in Ukraine and the fact that the Ukraine situation exploded at all is so clearly and directly the result of specific Biden policies related to international relations and international energy policy and domestic energy policy, and a frankly extra legal blending of the three. It's so clearly a direct result that one cannot make the Hamlin's razor argument never attribute to malice that which can be explained by incompetence. No reasonable person can look at that and say that it wasn't done on purpose.
I do not accept funding, okay, a meat grinder that consumes the lives of 1 million men just to weaken a geopolitical rival. Okay, that's monstrous. I do not accept that. And the fact that we have done that, if the United States actually does get involved in a war, okay, let's say with Iran, what do you think? Do you think Russia's going to stand by, or do you think Russia's going to do everything it can to basically bolster Iran's defenses against us and ensure maximum casualties of U.S. personnel? They absolutely will, and I mean, from objectively, they would be justified in doing so.
Yeah.
In fear of your own voters, there is nothing America can do for you, nor, for that matter, is there any of our own making. If you're running in fear of your own voters, there is nothing America can do for you, nor, for that matter, is there anything that you can do for the American people who elected me and elected President Trump.
There is nothing you can do for the American people. Get it.
You need democratic mandates to accomplish anything of value in the coming years. Have we learned nothing that thin mandates produce unstable results? But there is so much of value that can be accomplished with the kind of democratic mandate that I think will come from being more responsive to the voices of your citizens. If you're going to enjoy competitive economies, if you're going to enjoy affordable energy and secure supply chains, then you need mandates to govern, because you have to make difficult choices to enjoy all of these things. And of course, we know that very well in America. You cannot win a democratic mandate by censoring your opponents or putting them in jail. Whether that's the leader of the opposition, a humble Christian praying in her own home, or a journalist trying to report the news. Nor can you win one by disregarding your basic electorate on questions like who gets to be a part of our shared society. And of all the pressing challenges that the nations represented here face, I believe there is nothing more urgent than mass migration. Today.
Okay.
Oh, snap. So you can't generate consensus by banning people.
Correct.
That's yep.
You can't generate a consensus by segregating the population ideologically.
That's right. If you suppress freedom of speech, if you ban freedom of speech, then you cannot generate a natural, organic, social grassroots movement, okay, that is objectively in the people's interest because it's coming from the people, okay? If you cannot do that, then democracy is a joke, and like he said, we can't use you.
Okay, he touched on this next point a little bit earlier in the speech, but here he expands on it a little bit. And this is going to be the last point that we address from the speech, because after this, it's more of the now tell him what you told him, like I said before. So we'll go ahead and take this point and then wrap it up. Mario, I know you've got to get going, but this is probably, in my opinion, the most important thing that he covers in the speech. And he mentioned it earlier. He treats it more aggressively here, and I wish he had done this toward the beginning of the speech. But in fairness, you kind of want to lock him in before you hit him with this 1-2 punch.
Yep.
Almost 1 in 5 people living in this country moved here from abroad. That is, of course, an all-time high. It's a similar number, by the way, in the United States.
Okay, in this Munich, he's in Germany, and right, so he just said 20% of your population are foreigners.
Country moved here from abroad. That is, of course, an all-time high. It's a similar number, by the way, in the United States, also an all-time high. The number of immigrants who entered the EU from non-EU countries doubled between 2021 and 2022 alone. And of course, it's gotten much higher since. And we know this situation, it didn't materialize in a vacuum. It's the result of a.
He just said that the amount of mass migration doubled between 2021 and 2022. Y'all, Tommy Robinson has been talking about the Muslim rape gangs in Europe, in England in particular, since before Trump ran the first time.
Yeah.
Right. So this was a major existential threat 4 or 5 years before what he's talking about it doubling.
I first learned about that in 2005. Okay, like
Right.
that's how far back that story goes, and it probably goes back further. But yeah, 2005, I was aware of that from Tommy Robinson.
And we talk. They
Robert
talked
Spencer.
about these grooming. This is a bit of an aside, but I'll just real quick. You'll hear them referred to as grooming gangs, and early on the conversation, they're referred to as grooming gangs, and kind of the idea you got was that it was groups of young men that were kind of pushing young women, the local young women in the local population, toward preferring to date other than European men, right? They were kind of moving them slowly into, well, you should date a brown man instead of a white man, and it was that kind of. That's not what these gangs are. These aren't subtle, slow, overtime psychological operations. These are a dozen men kidnapping a baby and doing things to it that we will not repeat on air. The kinds of things that Democrats want to depict in literature to your children in kindergarten, but plus extra violence and blood. That's who we're talking about here.
2022 alone, and of course, it's gotten much higher since. And we know this situation, it didn't materialize in a vacuum. It's the result of a series of conscious decisions made by politicians all over the continent and others across the world over the span of a decade. We saw.
Did you know, Mario, were you aware that a vice president with a sufficiently fortified scrotum could slap 750 people at the same time?
No, I didn't know that could happen, but I'm excited. I'm happy to see it.
But there we go. We had it on tape.
All the horrors wrought by these decisions yesterday in this very city.
There we go.
And of
Call 'em out.
course, I can't bring it up again without thinking
Look at the crowd
about
get
the
uncomfortable.
terrible victims who had a beautiful winter day in Munich ruined. Our thoughts and prayers are with them and will remain with them. But why did this happen in the first place? It's a terrible story, but it's one we've heard way too many times in Europe. And
Yeah.
God,
So
this is the part where if he was a German citizen, he'd be arrested. Okay.
correct.
Talking about he brings
Dozens
up
injured in Munich car ramming as authorities say suspect had Islamist
correct an
Islamist
Afghan,
orientation.
an Afghan
Right, a car
force.
plowed into demonstrators in Munich on Thursday, injuring at least 36 in a suspected attack days ahead of national elections and shortly before world leaders were due in the southern Germany city for a high-level security conference. Now, that first, fuck these guys, right? Plowed into demonstrators. What were they demonstrating for? What were they demonstrating on behalf of? What was the motivating factor? The suspect is a 24-year-old asylum seeker from Afghanistan. Okay.
Well, it goes here. Let me. It goes right back to your argument about burning the Quran in Sweden. Okay, you have a group of people protesting against the AFD. Okay, and an Afghan in a car or truck of peace plows into them. Okay, how fucking ironic is that? Okay, you're.
Yeah. But then the other piece of that, it says 24-year-old asylum seeker from Afghanistan. There is no such thing as an asylum seeker from Afghanistan in Germany.
No, it's a hostile foreign national.
If you are an asylum seeker, if you are fleeing your country because your country is not safe to be in, and you are 15 countries away, you're not an asylum seeker.
Yeah.
You're an invader. At the most generous, you're a tourist.
Mm-hmm.
But you are surely not an asylum seeker.
Yeah. There's no war in Kazakhstan.
Correct.
And unfortunately, too many times in the United States as well. An asylum seeker, often a young man in his mid-20s, already known to police, rams a car into a crowd and shatters a community. How many times must we suffer these appalling setbacks before we change course and take our shared civilization in a new direction?
Yep.
See, right there, that's one of the places where I thought he hedged a little bit. Take our shared civilization in a new direction. He should have said, take it back.
Take your country back. Yes, exactly.
Take your country back.
But he did, but he knows where he is. He knows who he's speaking to, and he understands like subtleties in the rhetoric.
In a more generous interpretation, to what he said there, take our shared civilization in a new direction. One can interpret that as he's addressing these communist, these socialist European leaders. Take your civilization in a new direction, not take it back, because let's be frank, you never had it to begin with. You were always cowards and socialists.
Here, I'm out of time, so I want to make one closing statement here. Okay.
Yeah, please do, and then I'll go ahead and wrap it up.
What JD Vance is saying is basically two things here: that the United States is backing, okay, in support of an organic rightward shift, okay, in European politics. Okay, one,
yes,
the United States is not actively, but at least passively supporting the Alternative for Deutschland. All right. Two, the United States. The United States is in support of a growing trend in Europe, okay, that's called remigration, okay, basically sending them back, ship them back, okay, deport them. Mass deportations in Europe is essential and necessary, all right, and the United States would be in support of that, which is huge, all right. You need to get these people out of power in Europe who are presently holding those seats, all right, and then we can actually get to work saving Western civilization. So anyway, so that's why I think JD Vance's speech was very inspirational, and a lot of people needed to hear it, especially people in the UK. All right, I'm just, maybe it's just because I understand the language, of course, but from what I've seen online, basically like a gasp and then a gasp and then relief. Okay, from a lot of people in Europe hearing something that is essentially illegal. All right, this man came waving a torch, right, and inspired a lot of people. So, all right, guys, I do have to go.
All right, Mario, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for coming in and sharing this with us this morning, Mario. We'll catch you next time. Now, for everybody else, we appreciate you watching this morning. Make sure to support the show. We are live every Monday through Friday at 07:30 until we're tired of running our damn mouths. We always do at least a half an hour, and more lately we've been doing an hour to an hour and a half. We greatly appreciate your patronage, your viewer support. You can support the show. There's a link below in the description to buymeacoffee.com/brushfiremind, and that helps us to keep the lights on, handle replacing the cameras and the microphones and all that stuff when it happens. Importantly, today anything that gets donated today, I'm going to put into sending a good microphone to Mario and get that damn that flippy headset thing off of him, because brilliant man with bad audio is not the best thing, and his audio could definitely be worse. But anyway, so a little bit of housekeeping before I close this up today. Throughout the day today, I'm going to be working with OBS and some technical stuff with the various mixer boards and Stream Deck controllers. There's a lot of equipment, a lot of machines going on in the studio. So throughout the day, you may see me pop up live on any of these platforms off and on. I'm not doing another show today, so if you see me pop up live, it's just a test run. Feel free to tune in and watch for a few minutes if you catch me doing one of those tech call tech support runs where I'm just testing how something works online. But that's all that is for the rest of the day today is I'm doing my own tech support. So thanks for watching this morning, guys. We appreciate you. We love you. Y'all be safe out there, and we will see you tomorrow.